All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here in person at the ASU Center for Planetary Health and also online. My name is Iveta Silova, and I'm Professor and Associate Dean of Global Engagement at Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at ASU. And I'm joined by this amazing panel of people from Teachers College as well, but actually across other units too. And we will do introductions shortly. But before the introductions, I very quickly wanted to note that this week marks the inaugural LearningPlanet Festival that we have organized in the Greater Phoenix area to celebrate all of the work that we do around to address the issues of planetary sustainability in our community. And today's session is one of a series of many events that we are organizing this week. And you can check out those other events at the learningplanetfestival.org and filter by ASU and find out other activities that we have organized this week. Tomorrow is a big day because we will be launching the Regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development. It's a center that has received recently a designation from the United Nations University, so we will have a series of events dedicated to that. And Friday, we will have lots of high school students coming to this space also to learn more about sustainability and education and the intersections of these issues with global futures. But our panel today is called Reimagining Education for Planetary Futures, a conversation with members of Learning Futures Collaboratives. Learning Futures Collaboratives is an initiative that we started that grew out of the efforts at Teachers College at ASU, efforts generated by faculty, researchers, students, and staff members who work together to mobilize forces to rethink and redefine the role of education as we think about all the challenges that we are facing, whether it's COVID-19 or globalization or racial and economic injustices or climate crisis, human migration, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, the Internet of Things, bioengineering, basically all of the different challenges that we face as a humanity today. And it started with this assumption that a child born today will be shaped by accelerating change in technology, climate, demography, our physical and social environments, and the speed and convergence of change across so many dimensions of human experience will shape this child's life in ways that are as profound as they are unpredictable. And we have to be ready for it. So the kind of larger overarching question of the Learning Futures Collaboratives is how would education system respond to planetary challenges that we face? And what kind of planetary futures are we preparing for with the help of education? So I would like you to welcome the members of the different Learning Futures Collaboratives. And I will ask everybody to introduce themselves and their collaboratives that they represent in 1 minute. And then we will have a series of other questions before we open it up to the audience. But very quickly, we have 5 representatives of 5 different collaboratives here today. Education, Sustainability, and Global Futures is one. The other one is Artificial Intelligence and Education. Another Learning Futures Collaborative is called Designing the New American School. Then Learning and Educating Across Refugee Immigrant Networks, and Imagination and Future Thinking in K-12 Schooling. And we'll start with these brief introductions, 1 minute each, so that we have space to discuss and time to discuss all of the other questions. And we'll start with Andrea, and I'll do a slide.
Hey, thank you. I'm Andrea Weinberg, and I'm an assistant professor at the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. And my research and teaching passions intersect at the nexus of teacher education and sustainability education and transdisciplinary collaboration. And I'm honored to be here today representing the Education, Sustainability, and Global Futures Learning Futures Collaborative. And our LFC came together around the future focus question that's on the slide there. And we've been convening this last year to explore how education, academia, and education research can be implicated in the sustainability crises and can begin developing common intellectual and action-driven agendas to radically re-envision and rebuild education in ways that nurture non-exploitative and interdependent relations among people and among people in the natural world in order to recuperate, to build resilience, and to sustain the well-being of all. So we come to this work with a spirit of openness and a commitment to working together to create enduring relationships and collaborations in which we find joyous ways together to move toward our common goals. So if anything that I share with you today resonates and you want to join us, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea and Adnan. You're next.
This is Adnan. I'm second year PhD student in Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, and I'm part of learning and educating across refugee immigrant networks, learning future collaboratives. Our group is focusing on how can we promote and enhance immigrant and refugees education experience. We like as a group, we start to think about like redesigning the whole system and how can we offer a new perspective to all participants and all actors and policymakers in the field. And we offer like a critical conversation on like refugee education to think about the concepts, definitions, refugee education designing, and also to respond the current crisis, also upcoming crisis. So if you want to be part of our like learning future collaboratives, so you can reach out. And also we have critical conversation series on refugee education. We already had 3 webinars, and we will have 3 more webinars, and the next one will be on February 28th. So please reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, Adnan. Sean, you're next.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Sean Leahy. I'm the Director of Creative and Emerging Technologies at Enterprise Technology here at ASU, representing the Artificial Intelligence and Education LFC. We're a small group, but we do bring together experts in education, technology, and future studies, as well as human systems engineering. I'm joined by Dr. Puni Mishra, who's the Associate Dean of Scholarship and Innovation out of the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, and also Dr. Scotty Craig and Rod Roscoe, who are Associate Professors of Human Systems Engineering in the Polytechnic School here at ASU, and also joined by 2 graduate students, Rashna Mathur and May, who also bring a very fresh perspective to the work we're doing and keeping us, on our game to make sure that we include the student perspective. Essentially, the big focus or the big issue that our LFC is tackling is this question of how can we ensure that artificial intelligence in education proceeds with a human-centered and in a humanist design at its core. When we think about the implementation and interpretation of these new and emerging technologies, how do we ensure that the human-centered and the human agency is at the core?
Thank you so much, Sean. And Bri, you're next.
Hi, my name is Bregje van Geffen. Is my thing coming up? Okay. I'm from the Learning Futures Collaborative, Imagination and Futures Thinking. I just really need this. I'm so sorry. Oops. Yeah. Imagination. I'm from the Learning Futures Collaboration, Imagination and Futures Thinking in K-12. What we are doing is we are collaborating on the question: how can we best prepare youth and think critically about and take agency for their futures? And we have a really awesome group of team members, 5 students, both undergraduate and graduate students, and we have 9 professors, from assistant to full professors, and we collaborate bi-weekly meetings. And what we do mainly is we lunch, which is very important because we love eating, right? And then also we discuss readings, and we have critical conversation about these readings. We also test and play games about futures thinking and we talk about ID generation and about how we can use these games in classes. We have guest conversational partners. We have project explorations. We talk about that and how we can create future thinking in K-12 places. And then also we share things and we give feedback to each other, and also we celebrate each other's achievements.
Wonderful. And we have one of the LFC representatives joining us online, and that's Steve.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Iveta, and thank you to everyone who helped make it possible for me to be here virtually. My name is Stephen Weiner, and I am a senior research analyst with the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College through the Center on Reinventing Public Education, which is just coming up on its first year of being affiliated with ASU, and happily so. So the Learning Futures Collaborative that I, along with my colleagues at SERPI, as we call ourselves, SERPI, the other folks are Chelsea Waite and Robin Lake. Robin is our director. We came together to really think through kind of like what I want to call like a paradox of practice, which is we all know that the high school system in the United States, at the very least the United States, is extremely broken. There's near universal agreement that it is not serving, certainly not the most marginalized students, but arguably a much wider set of students. At the same time, we also know that there are many good examples of innovative secondary high school programs, even whole schools that are doing things differently, that are being customized to students' strengths and needs, that are holistic, that make useful connections with the community, and that are more endowing of agency to students. So we know that there are these isolated examples of these things. We know the system is broken, and we also know that the system is extremely entrenched and resistant to change. So our LFC really wants to tackle this big question, which is, what would it take to create a national high school system that embodied many of these things that we know and that we here as a multidisciplinary group of stakeholders, including leaders in schools, in practice teachers, the disciplinary partners that we have from faculty and staff at ASU. We know that there is some consensus around what we think the future of high schools should be. How can we make that systemic? How can we create the conditions, both with like a policy lens and thinking about kind of the organizational structures and cultures of organizations? How can we do that? Our kind of hypothesis here is that we need to have a very, very rigorous reimagining of how high schools across America can be retooled and redesigned to be more equitable and to provide a richer, more fulfilling future for all U.S. students.
Excellent. So these are all huge questions, as you can see, and it's really also nice to see some of the intersections between the big questions. And I hope that we can explore some of these intersections in today's dialogue. But before we do that, I actually wanted to give a chance for all of the LFC representatives to talk a little bit more about their work so that we get to know what is happening. So I will ask everyone to take 2 minutes, a little bit longer this time, to tell us about one initiative that your LFC is developing to address the big issues that you're wrestling with as a group. And we can maybe shuffle the order a little bit. And Bregje, would you like to start this time?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did in our Futures Thinking Collaborative is the Center of Science and Imagination. They designed an activity. It's called Futures by Chance, Futures by Choice. And it's an activity in which participants work on a big, huge timeline and experience how it is to build a world around a possible future. And it is what we did in the Futures Collaborators. We played the game and we evaluated it. We gave feedback. We thought about possible ideas to renew it or improve it. And after that, a couple of people among whom me took it, and now we are going to use it to reimagine the game and go and we developed a workshop for teachers, and the teachers are going to reimagine the game. So we are not going to do it ourselves, but the teachers are actually going to do it and make it available and make it also appropriate and suitable for middle school students, so that we can actually go and play the game or like the activity and do it with middle school students, so that middle school students can think about how can we take the agency to think about our futures. How can we think about what my preferred future is, or maybe my preferred future is not your preferred future, and how can we create that empathy for each other, and how can we work towards futures that are more equitable and maybe more for all of us.
Is it a card game or an activity game? What kind of game?
Yeah. So it is right now. It is a game that is like a really big timeline, but it's and it has like 4 rounds, and you work with like post-its, and you paste the post-its on the timeline. But it's like futures by chance. Is you roll a dice, and when it's a smiley face, you get like a positive future. So you paste a positive future on the timeline. And when you roll the dice and you have a negative smiley, like a sad face smiley, you put a negative future on the timeline. And then you have different rounds and different choices or chances. And then eventually you will create, like, you can also put in your own choices, so you can write down your own futures that you want to add, and so you can create your own world that might happen in 100 years from now.
Also, I can't wait to hear more how that goes and playing the game one day. Andrea, what's the most interesting thing you're working on in your LFC right now?
So as an LFC, we've organized our efforts around 4 strands, and those are learning, research, engagement, and institutions and systems. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one initiative that's in one of those strands, but it kind of cuts across all of those. So within each of these strands, we have several working groups. So we have 10 working groups in total, and I guess we just created another one today. So we have 11 working groups in total. And one of those is working to develop an MA in Education for Sustainability and Global Futures. And this is situated in learning. It cuts across all of the strands. So I'm going to describe it. In terms of learning, the aims of the master's program is to be a mirror for the kind of approaches we envision that will bring about social and cultural change in educational spaces. This involves coupling transdisciplinary knowledge and learning with agentive action, and we intend to incorporate unique pedagogical approaches that allow learners to explore the world as it exists, as complex and dynamic and relational. And we intend to model critical and ecologically attuned pedagogies that will lead to meaningful individual and collective action. So beyond the learning in the program, it is a thesis-based master's degree. And as they're culminating research projects, students will conduct collaborative, participatory, and ethical transdisciplinary research with community partners to co-develop disruptive solutions and transform narratives about education futures and the ways in which we engage in teaching and learning. In terms of engagement, so we're mobilizing forces and networks and expertise by co-designing this master's program across colleges at ASU with faculty from global partners. And I think perhaps most importantly, we're using a range of approaches to engage stakeholders, including youth, educators, activists, and anyone else who's interested in helping us develop a forward-focused vision for this academic degree program that aims to fundamentally change the role of education. So there's sessions tomorrow morning and also Friday morning, if this is something that you're interested in here at the Learning Planet Festival. And finally, the master's is related to our group's strand on changing institutions and systems, because one of the aims is for our graduates to lead change through education in the face of ecological and social complexity. So that's one example of an initiative, and I hope it gives you some sense of how we as an LFC have organized ourselves in these 4 strands and also in working groups. So thank you.
Thank you. I didn't realize there were 11 working groups already. Wow. And we've been only working for 1 semester. Adnan, you're next.
So as learning education and learning and education across refugee and immigrant education group, we only have one initiative, and it's called Critical Conversation on Refugee Education. Before mentioning that, I need to explain a little bit background of the situation. So we bring people from the field, NGO workers, scholars, all around the world, from the Niger to United States, or from the South Asian countries, to talk about the same issue, like the refugee or immigrant education. And we start talking about at the beginning, who is the refugees and who is the migrants, because countries, states, authorities use different definitions for the same people. So we bring attention to I don't want to say to reconceptualize the whole system, but at least we bring attention to the all issues in the field. And also 2022 record the most largest figures forcibly displacement people in the human history. It means that we will have more displaced people in our life, and also unfortunately our education system is not ready to meet these people needs. Also, in the migration crisis, educators are the first responder. On the other hand, educators, in terms of the qualification, are not ready to meet displaced students' needs. That's why we bring people all around the world to talk about immigrant and refugee education in a critical conservation series.
And I love this series. If some of you have not checked those out, I think you should, because it's a really amazing groups that not only cuts across geographical context, but also different stakeholder groups, right? So you have the refugee students in the same conversation with policymakers and researchers and community members, which is, I think, a really beautiful conversation and powerful space. But Sean, let's go to you next.
Yeah, let's bring it back to the AI. So again, we're a small LFC, and we're mostly exploratory at this stage. And that's one of our aims too, is to grow a community both internally to ASU, but also externally to our colleagues and friends from around the world. But essentially what we've initially set out to do is really explore the potential transformative opportunities of that emerging artificial intelligence sector in education. It's not hard now to see that even in the mainstream, generative AI technologies and specific tools are being ushered through groundbreaking advancements in one of the areas of artificial intelligence known as sort of the generative AI models. So things that you might also recognize are sort of to put it loosely, we're representing almost a Cambrian level of an explosion of these tools making mainstream. Now, of course, this has been field that's been in development for 50 years plus. But now with the things coming onto stage in the mainstream media, things like ChatGPT, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and many others, these are presenting new challenges and also new opportunities for learners, educators, and policymakers around the globe. So we're really working on developing this program of inquiry around those opportunities and challenges, specifically facing higher education, and how those technologies may hold the potential to even change how we approach teaching and learning.
Wonderful and very exciting. Stephen, and over to you now.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. It's really inspiring to hear what everyone else is working on and like the just variety of different initiatives. For our part, I think the kind of value add that CERPI has had for decades now as a research center has been taking a fundamentally systems level approach to looking at education. So when it comes to this question of how might we design a new American high school system, I think we recognize this is complex, it's multifaceted, and I think are happy to be able to tap into the variety of different disciplines and different expertises at ASU that kind of go beyond the Teachers College. So I think that big initiative and the way we have our LFC designed is to come to the end of this, the process here, which we've designed as sort of a series of 4 meetings, and end up with something that is like a suite of possible interdisciplinary research proposals that might go under something like a potential R&D center at ASU around designing the new American high school. So we've done 2 of our meetings, which I think of sort of roughly as being divided into like the visioning meeting, in which we heard from a whole bunch of systems leaders that are doing innovative things around the country. The second meeting was more around building relationships. It was finding out the resources that we have within our LFC. And we have roughly 20 folks from all over the university who come from different kinds of angles around systems in education, not just secondary, but also post-secondary. And then so going forward, looking into the spring, we are hosting our second 2 meetings, which focus on the barriers to change. And then our last meeting will be really about crafting these, hopefully not too hypothetical, but at this point, sort of roughly theoretical research proposals that link different people's disciplines, the LFC members who might not normally be working together, and ask the question, well, how could we collaborate in ways that would illuminate the challenges and the opportunities for school system redesign in ways that we haven't thought of before? Because it's a longstanding problem that a lot of people have attempted to address.
Awesome and very exciting. And I think listening to all of you, to all of these initiatives that you're working on, I'm also realizing that kind of confirming what I already know, that education system is one of the probably most difficult systems to change, because it takes a long time, because there are so many political interests involved, because it has been institutionalized so deeply and ingrained so deeply in our minds that it's very, very difficult to imagine education otherwise, right? Beyond the one classroom, one teacher model, or, even especially more radical alternatives. So, but this next question will be very hypothetical. So if you will have 3 minutes for this question, it's a little bit longer time. But if you had all the available resources and all the decision-making capabilities to implement 3 big initiatives to radically transform education for planetary futures, what would those be? And let's reverse the order now, and maybe Stephen, just go with you since you're on the roll.
Well, that's a huge question. I'm not sure if I can think of 3 large initiatives, though I think maybe I would look at what we are talking about in our LFC. And we have these sort of 4 big buckets around the different components of education. I would think that maybe we could subdivide those and say, well, we really need to do deeper research into what are the barriers that are preventing our schools from becoming more student-centered, more responsive to the agency that we know that students at the secondary level want to exhibit. So what are the systems barriers to doing that sort of thing? What are the systems barriers? Maybe this would be like a big bucket around like the content of school. Like why do we know, at least I would say that from the last 50 years of learning sciences research, we really have a pretty good idea of what students need. We have a pretty good idea of how students learn. And so what are the systemic barriers that prevent the content from becoming responsive to what we know and what research has shown? I would say that maybe the next thing would be a deeper dive into the kind of the outside the school conditions. So when we think about like the not just policy barriers, I think that's maybe kind of a big catch-all phrase that we use, but the rationale for entrenchment, like the reason why we have issues motivating stakeholders, or why stakeholders get motivated and then their motivations maybe don't persist into like long-term durable organizational change when we look at like districts. Maybe this is just a bit of a half-baked thought here, but really discussing the notion of like the fractured organizational structures and district structures in our country, at least, and how those are in some sense very good at resisting change because our systems are so fractured. So maybe that would be the second bucket. And then the third one would be, and I'll at least speak for myself, although I think I'm possibly, this might resonate with Bregje and some others, around the idea of reimagining and really digging deep into the fact that we're just not very good at reimagining school systems. If you look back over the last 100 years, schools have a very strong grip on our imagination, our collective imagination. And then when you look at popular culture, you see school continue to be represented even in more futuristic scenarios as sort of the same one teacher, one classroom, students in desks, students without agency. This is, I think, maybe one of the biggest challenges is kind of tackling the systems in our heads and really trying to figure out why do we still hold on to these ideas. We've all been through school, I think is possibly one of a good starting place for this conversation. So we all have a deeply ingrained sense of what school looks like and what it has to be. But I think we need to practice reimagining, and we need some better tools to help us break away from what we think school has to be.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. But let's jump to Bregje, because you made such a nice link to the reimagination, and that directly speaks to the work that you do. So what will be your big three things?
So I'm speaking for myself. I'm not sure if I will speak for my entire Learning Futures Collaborative, of course. So I keep thinking, so yes, I agree with Stephen, like imagination is such an important element in education, not only to reimagine education in itself, but also in its core, and to cultivate imagination in children. And I have taken a course, Education in the Anthropocene, with a very nice professor, Iveta. And one of the things that I keep thinking about is one of the readings that came up, and it was about shimmer. And I think it was Rose.
Yeah, Deborah Bird Rose.
Yes. And it was about shimmer and how you need dullness to also create shimmer. And I think that the shimmer, there is no shimmer in education at this point, or not too much. And I think that has to do with that there is a lot of decontextualized education. It's a lot of standardization. And I feel that we should go back to a system in which learning is about passion. It's about really living in learning within an ecology, like being in a situation in which everything is like in connection to each other, and not only within humor, but you can also think about learning with, like we talked about that too in that course, like not only about learning with humans, but also learning with nature and learning with animals and learning with everything that is in connection with life. And I think that should be the future. Like for me, that is something that I really like. And I also see that it's something that my children really like and that my children are really passionate about. And it's not so much that is in their education at this point. So I think that is very important. And I also think that futures thinking is a very nice tool to do so because it provides a pragmatic tool to think about these things. It provides a tool to imagine the future of education through the eyes of children, through the eyes of teachers, through the eyes of administrators, and think about what might the future of education be, and use expertise, use the past experience, because future cannot exist without past and present, right? So it is all connected to each other, and with that you can use whatever you already know to imagine like what can be in the future, and I think that is very important.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Bri. Wow, who wants to go next? Adnan, go ahead.
Like if I have like enough sources, if I have a power to like think about the design education, to be honest, I will start to destroy the whole system. Because
Nice.
because like if you try to change a system that promotes racism, sexism, like Islamophobia, xenophobia, everything, you will make sustainable everything. Because like we do not destroy the wall, just we open some small holes in the wall, and we believe that we have a sense of like satisfaction. We change something, but we do not, because still the whole like system exists. So the first thing I think, as a like a sense of anarchy, we need to destroy the whole wall and whole system, because it will give us a chance to create a new like the and sustainable environment, friendly and social justice oriented system. Then we can create a more democratic classrooms in the area. And secondly, if I have enough power and sources, we must ask like the children what they need and what they want. Because when we think about and like still the same problem like in refugee education too, we are thinking and we are speaking in behalf of someone which are not presented in the space. So we should and we must have a space for all people, like even children and people who are the actor of the education field, and we ask them to be part of the new designing the system. So it's for the second one, the second, and the third one is to remove the all power dynamics in the whole education system. Without the thinking about the power dynamics in the education system, we cannot change the education system. Still, it remains at the same thing. We are promoting the all inequalities in the education system. So yeah, it's my perspective.
Wow, I love all of the radical visions and proposals. Let's see what's next.
Happy to go, although I'm I feel like it will pale in comparison to Adnan's bold statement. So thank you. So I also like I want to acknowledge that these are kind of my ideas, and they will be certainly more fully formed as I continue to work with the LFC and collaborate. So I feel like one of the things that needs to be done is to reorient the purposes of education. I do appreciate destroy. I really like that. I might adopt that, and I will be sure to attribute that to you. So specifically thinking about transforming the dominant narratives around education. So for decades, it's been framed as this imperative for global competitiveness, for economic security, for endless economic growth. And that's paved the way for this instrumental view of education that foregrounds economic and technocratic kinds of ideologies. And the narratives and the accompanying policies have served to really constrain curriculum and sharpen the focus on accountability measures and tested content. And that leaves behind holistic and humanistic ideals about the nature and purpose of education. So I feel like a shift in values is needed toward imagining education as an avenue for large-scale transformation to engender collective engagement, redress social and environmental inequities, and counteract dominant anthropocentric paradigms that threaten the well-being of the planet's interconnected systems and humans alike. So the values and principles that underpin education, we need them to focus on collective, collaborative, and common goals beyond the individual that center achieving just and sustainable futures. And so with this wholesale shift comes the demand for innovative pedagogies that align with these. So that leads me to my second thought, my second initiative, and this is focused specifically on teachers and teacher education. So that's where the bulk of my attention typically lies. I want to engage in participatory work with teachers alongside educators to leverage their knowledge and expertise, because there are teachers who are successfully promoting agentive visions of students and engaging students in meaningful learning that involves consequential action and invites students to be participants in the world around us. So the ultimate aim of this participatory work would be to broaden the tools, capacities, and networks available to educators to center the voices of teachers themselves as they support one another to gain expansive understandings of transdisciplinary issues critical to our future and to adopt innovative pedagogical approaches. So that would be a second. And a third would be related to equitably funding research, and specifically foregrounding social science research broadly as it pertains to climate change, sustainability science. So between 1990 and 2018, the natural and technical sciences received 770% more funding than the social sciences. So only 0.1% of all research funding was spent on social science research related to climate mitigation. So I feel like these, if the resources were available to me, I would prioritize engaging in disciplinary diverse research around climate change mitigation that's inclusive of education and arts and humanities.
Awesome. That sounds like a great plan too. Sean, and what do you imagine in the AI space?
Okay, well, when you get asked a hypothetical question, we've got hypothetical responses as well. But it's interesting just listening to some of the other responses too. I think some of the stuff that we've kind of prepared through our LFC, I think, feed nicely into that, especially when we're thinking about the challenges of how do you think of a new future without thinking about today just plus one, and really breaking from those. And we're seeing some of that disruption already. And just paying attention to the news, you'll see the hyperbole and the existential threats being raised right now in education around, for example, ChatGPT. How is this going to change the way that we assess students if we can't give them take-home essays anymore, if we're having ChatGPT answer those questions and things like that? So really thinking about that question, kind of focusing on three sort of ways to investigate and really push forward in the area of AI in education. The first one being really focused around personalized learning. So again, leveraging these generative AI tools to really enhance the personalized learning experience for students, finding ways to use these technologies to tailor to their individual abilities and needs, knowing that all students come at things from different perspectives, and how can we leverage these types of generative tools to give students what they need when they need it. Going back to a decades-long sort of pursuit in AI is this idea of a truly intelligent tutoring system. This is something that we've been promised in education for at least 30 to 40 years and has not yet been realized. But we're getting closer. And I think one of the, again, pushing in this particular space to provide students with that real-time feedback and guidance that can help them work through educational materials or social situations, things like that, that typically we've seen, if you think about the structures that Stephen and Bregje have mentioned, that one classroom, one teacher model, And even if you think about sci-fi and on Star Trek, they're in a spaceship and it's still one classroom, one teacher, just funny looking outfits. But really trying to break apart from that and really think about what does it mean to have this sort of artificial intelligence tools at our disposal. And of course, the other piece of that is automated content generation, which is literally what a generative AI system does, but being able to leverage that on both sides for not only for student creation, but also for the educator themselves. How can we take off some of the burden of doing some of more of the sort of, let's say, just more routine tasks that don't require a lot of, again, freeing up some of that time to focus on relationship building and other ways of really working on allowing for students to demonstrate their understandings and really thinking about what does that mean as opposed to just kind of going through. As much as students may be able to write essays easier, again, this challenges the way we've done it before. And how can we think about better ways, deeper ways for students to showcase that kind of learning and understanding? And to quickly just kind of touch on like how we would go about doing this, because that's a big topic that we grapple with all the time, is one, the sort of mandatory inclusion of diverse stakeholders, making sure that we are representing educators, students, parents, community members in those decision-making processes and being involved in the processes of creating and developing guidelines around using these tools. Prioritizing ethical considerations, so specifically paying attention to and mitigating for unintended consequences, right? When these tools are used especially in an educational setting, who is being disadvantaged, right? With every new technology, there are those who can be advantaged and those who can be disadvantaged. How do we think about those to mitigate those issues? And finally, kind of coming back again to that initial question, is this idea of incorporating the principles of human-centered design. Always with these technologies, making sure that they're human-centered, human-focused, with this aim of how do we create and promote more human agency and not unintentionally remove it. So those are our sort of hypothetical things we could do if we had unlimited resources to do them all.
And I have one question for you. For your hypotheticals, did you consult with Chat GPT or are these your responses?
Absolutely. Well, a mixture of both. So also looking into those. Fun thing, I actually gave a talk 2 weeks ago, and while other people were presenting, actually had Chat GPT respond to a prompt and wrote a presentation.
Nice.
And it's interesting. I mean, it's not perfect. There are lots of issues with it. But what it does is it shows you really quickly how you might be able to use that in a different way and how you can expedite some of those processes of just like drafting and getting from version 0 to version 4, things like that.
Wow, really, really, really interesting. And I just love how you are all approaching this big question of reimagining education from different angles. And there is major, I think it's really interesting to see it from the different perspectives and bring us all into the conversation. But we have just a couple more minutes left. And I wanted to ask, are there any urgent questions from the audience, either here in the auditorium or online? And for the online, maybe, Anne, you can check in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Then I think we can close. And maybe in closing, any final closing remarks after you've heard all of your colleagues, anything that sparked interest, any interesting connections that you saw? We probably have 1 minute or less per person.
Shall I go?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the last one talking. I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Then we've established that's the way we do it here.
Yeah.
I think, I touched on it before, but I think I'll mention it again. One of the things that's exciting for myself personally and the LFC that we're doing is I can see so many opportunities for cross-pollination just amongst the other LFC groups here as well. So one, I would heavily encourage that. And the second thing that I will do is, or I guess I'll do two. That was the first thing. The second thing is we're always looking to, again, part of our aims for this first year in this LFC is to grow a community. So if you hear this thing about AI in education, you do not have to be an expert in AI or in computer science to get involved. And so I would encourage you to look us up and through the Learning Futures Collaborative website and reach out and try to get involved. And the third and final thing is I'll put a shameless plug for one of our podcasts, which is the Learning Futures podcast, which we are just entering season 5, where you will hear from more of these lovely people and their LFCs through that as well. So I would encourage people, if you are interested, to kind of continue hearing about the work that's going on in these LFCs. Please look this up. Try to Learning Futures podcast wherever you get yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Closing remarks. Adnan?
It's to be here and to share my LFC groups interest and why we became together and why we focus on refugee and immigration education. So it's a great opportunity to have different groups under the LFC names, because our the civic education and education system and opportunities in education is different from each group. But on the other hand, we have a lot of opportunities to collaborate and also create a new, maybe not destroy the education system, but we can make up with some collaborations and work together. So it was great. And on 28th of February, from 9 a.m. till 11 a.m., we will host one of our webinar on integration of refugees and their contribution to host societies. And we will talk about this issue on 28th of February. All of people are invited.
Thank you. Thanks, Adnan.
So I really appreciate this opportunity. I want to thank the organizers for bringing us together to learn about the other LFCs. And it really inspired me to think about exploring any resources that they put out, and as well as how we as an LFC might share what we're doing so that we can identify those points of synergy. And as we work to destroy, or to whatever degree, the education systems and rebuild them and learn from one another. So thank you.
Wonderful. Bree, any thoughts? Final remarks?
Yeah, so I totally agree with all of you, actually, that I think that there is a lot of potential collaboration possibilities between the LFCs together. So I would greatly encourage the organizers to maybe do a entire day of I don't know,
retreat.
Yeah, like a retreat. Yeah, like a retreat of collaboration in which we could, but seriously, just a collaboration meeting or whatsoever, in which we can talk a little bit more between the groups. And for the rest, I think that also, but it's also sad for you guys, also for us, if you are interested in future thinking, in imagination, please reach out to me or to one of the other people from our LFC, and then we can totally talk.
Wonderful. And Steven, you have the last word before we close.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yes, I'll just echo the appreciation for not only organizing this event with the LearningPlanet Festival, which is great, but also bringing together all the heads of the LFCs. This community is really fascinating, and I feel like just at the beginning. So please, yes, organizers, please feel free to bring us together. Hopefully, at least some points virtually, so I can attend. But I will say, I think that there is also maybe a little bit of appreciation and a larger plug for the kind of interdisciplinarity and creativity, the academic creativity that goes into this kind of initiative from the MLFTC, the Teachers College side, and ASU more broadly. So I'd like to say, let's just take a moment and say it's really important that we can do this work. And it seems to be, I think, if we think of the future of education as also what we're doing, which is thinking broadly together about things in ways that no one has done before, I think we're just kind of living that right now. So that's, I'll just end on that.
Thanks, Steven. Thank you all of the panelists for being here, for sharing your ideas and your work. Thank you for the audience for joining us. And we'll take a very quick break, and then we'll roll into the other session of the LearningPlanet Festival. So stay tuned. So thank you again, and we'll continue the conversation.